Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Here in Alabama, if you were to ask anyone what do red suspenders, a white shirt, a baritone voice, and a storm have to do with each other, the answer would always be the same: James Spann. Known as Alabama's most trusted voice for weather coverage, there's a story behind the man you have come to know, trust, and love. That story is told in his new book, Weathering Life. It's for weather people, and it's also just for anybody who's interested in knowing what it's like coming out of South Alabama in the 1960s from a broken home. James says it's been a long journey. It's, to me, been pretty amazing. James was 7 years old when his father, Max Spann, walked out on him and his mother, setting in motion a chain of circumstances that led him to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and eventually into a 40-year-plus career as a meteorologist, the last 23 of which he's been at ABC 3340 here in Birmingham, during which time he and our very own executive producer, Jason Bradley, worked together for 13 years. Here to share the story behind the story in this new book, Weathering Life, is James Spann. James, welcome to Revealing the Truth. So good to see you again.
It's an honor to be here. How are you, sir?
I am well, thank you. There are so many facets to you that people really don't know. You are the trusted face, the trusted voice. Storm times, everybody looks at you. They actually look to you on a par with God when it comes to the weather, and feel like you're actually responsible. So people will get mad at you. People will get upset with you that what you said was going to happen didn't happen, and what you didn't say was going to happen happened. And how can you know? And here you are, not only are you a trusted voice and a family member because you're in everybody's home, you're also a part of you that a lot of people don't know is one of the most devoted and committed Bible study teachers for children, and a faithful Sunday morning in your place, in your home church, as faithful as the day is long, and have been teaching for how many years?
Children's ministry for 35.
35 years in children's ministry. A side of you that most people don't know. They know that they love you. They know that they trust you. They know that they relate to you. But what they don't know is why. And I believe that the reason is because of your relationship with God, because you have taught the children faithfully, and you've earned that trust. And it's because you've faithfully served. Okay? You know what it's like to have been a child who didn't have a relationship with his father. So a lot of your story is tied up in your relationship with the Father. And that's a part of the backbone of Weathering Life and this story. Take us back. I've read, unfortunately I didn't have a copy of the whole book, so I've read every excerpt I could possibly, so I've got about 75% of it. But I want you to take me back to the early years, because the early years were they were pretty good years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What was that like with mom, with dad, with growing up where you grew up?
Life was great. I am from Greenville, Alabama. And I bet you've never been to Greenville, Alabama, Rabbi. If you have, you probably didn't notice it. It's a small community between Montgomery and Mobile. This is in the southern part of the state. And you are quite a distance from both of those larger cities. You're basically in the middle of deep rural South Alabama. But I loved it. It was an amazing place to live. My friends were there. I just really enjoyed it. So my father was a lumber broker. He sold lumber at a lumber company in South Butler County, and apparently he did pretty well. We had a nice house. To me, it was a mansion when I was a child. I look back at it today, and it's a smaller house, right. But my mom was there, my dad was there. I was an only child, had no siblings, and life was good. My summer days were filled with spending time in the woods of Butler County, Alabama. We didn't have phones, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have Xboxes. We just played and we bonded and we had a marvelous time. So life was good. It was a great place at a great time, although there were things happening we didn't understand. In the woods on those summer days, we talk a lot about Vietnam. We didn't know what that was. We didn't know where it was, but we knew a lot of adults were talking about it, and we knew some of the kids that graduated from high school were going there, and they weren't coming back. And we also knew something was up with the way people treated other people. It was a different culture. This was the 60s in South Alabama, and I'll be honest with you, Rabbi, I didn't like church much in the 60s. I was afraid. I was afraid of the environment. I didn't feel comfortable there. Our biggest event is Vacation Bible School. That is the Super Bowl for children's ministry, guys. I didn't like VBS. Guess what the arts and crafts activity was during VBS during my day? We made ashtrays for the deacons so they could smoke in front of the church and talk bad about African Americans. We'd make the little cigarette holders and the tiles, and it was just, and those men scared me. That they had dark suits, they had these black rimmed glasses, and that's the only part of that that was a little challenging for me, was getting past that. We knew something wasn't right, but we weren't old enough to comprehend a lot of that.
You know, it's interesting when you describe that. Poor people don't know they're poor. People who are immersed in a culture where from generation to generation the stories are passed down, you adopt what it is that you've heard. You don't really develop that opinion on your own. You mimic, you replay, you repeat those kind of things. And so we look now at people our age, and they're saying, well, you were racist back then and segregationist and all these things. Well, if you were from the South, I'm not. I'm from Pennsylvania. We had our own problems with racial divides with Polish, with Hungarian. We were Steel City, Pittsburgh. Catholics and Jews, there were those kind of troubles. We didn't have as much as the black and white problem as did here, but it wasn't of your origin. It wasn't of your original thought. This was things you heard that didn't make sense to you because kids were kids.
Right. We weren't allowed to be seen with a black child in public. And if we went into downtown Greenville in a car together, one of us had to duck so that we couldn't be seen. I can't believe this happened in my lifetime, that this is where things were back then. And you're right, it was the culture back then. And those men at the church, they talked about ways of keeping black people out of the church, where it seemed to me you'd want everybody coming into the church to hear the message that was in there. And it just didn't make any sense. And later I would understand later in life. But what happened to me when I was 7 was a life-changing moment. I think everybody has one or two life-changing moments. You don't even know the morning that you wake up it's going to be a life-changing day. Something happens and everything changes. And for me, I was 7, which is a very tender age.
Yes.
And the bottom line is, the night before my father abandoned me and my mom, he left in the middle of the night. He never said goodbye, have a nice life, see you later. My father never told me that he loved me. To this day, I don't know if he did. But it was devastating. And I don't think anybody can understand the pain unless it's happened to you, where a parent that you love just leaves like that. And he never paid a cent of child support. So all of a sudden, I was a hurting child, and a child that was in a low-income family. My mama was the secretary at the high school, the public high school in Greenville. I would imagine she was probably making about $400 a year. And you can't raise a child on that, even in 1966. So all of a sudden, we go from this marvelous life in Butler County, Alabama, to a life where I became the man of the house at the age of 7. And I will say this. I'm a Romans 8:28 guy and a Matthew 6:33 guy. I've got some key verses, but on the Romans 8:28 thing, I had to learn hard work. I had to learn hard work. I started cutting grass. I was 7 years old. Normally you don't start working until you're maybe a teenager. I'd cut grass. I would carry golf clubs at the Greenville Country Club. I was a caddy at a very young age to make money so that we would have the means to buy food and support ourselves. And my secret in life is this: I'm not good at anything. I am not good at children's ministry. I am not good at being a television meteorologist. But I will work harder than anybody else to accomplish a task, and that work ethic came as a result of what happened to me when I was young.
You know, you look at the key verses, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. I go back to even the origin of all that, to Genesis 50, where Joseph stands before his brothers who are now kneeling before him, bowing before him, because God had prophesied 25 years before in a dream. And he says to them, what you meant for evil, God worked for his good so that many would be saved. My people were down to 70 plus one. That's extinction. If you have 71 spotted newts,
Yeah, you're done.
You're done. That's the end of you're extinct. And this brought about the restoration of the seed line that brought Jesus into the world, that'll call for Jesus' return. How marvelous, how majestic, how wonderful, how unexpected that bad thing. And that takes your character. You see, there's lots of kids who at 7 or 10 or 12 or whatever age had someone abandon them, and they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they turn to the street gangs, they turn to whoever would accept them and head down a path of destruction. You chose to head down the other way. Something was in you that was birthed in you, that in that breaking there was something released, and it was something that was good and has made you. And people comment that you go during these storms, 24, 36, 38, 40 hours. You can't turn the channel without seeing you there with the weather map behind you, okay, talking about this movement, and this is aloft, and this is heading this way, and people are shocked that you go from, and there's the old saying, all right, you know it's serious when James Spann takes off his jacket. That's a colloquialism here in Alabama. But those are words that everyone's, oh, well, you know it's going to be serious because James Spann is in his suspenders and his jacket's off. Okay? Trusted, hardworking, ethics, okay? Coming out of brokenness. So here you write this new book, Weathering Life. What prompted you to tell this story?
I've always kept notes on weather events in my life with no intention of publishing this. I mainly wanted to keep it for our two boys. We have two boys. So that they might want to know more about their dad, and I tried to communicate these things with them, but I wanted it in writing because that lasts. We had something that happened April 27, 2011 here, and that kind of changed everything. This was a generational tornado outbreak, and by generational, I kind of define that as something that happens about every 40 years. We had, on that one day, 62 tornadoes in my state, and the death toll that day was 252. It was, I've experienced a day like that when I was in high school, April 3rd, 1974. Prior to 2011, that was the last generational event. Prior to that, it was March 1932. But professionally, that's the first one I've worked. And to have that many people die on my watch when we thought the warnings were so good was staggering. It was our finest day and it was our worst day. And I wanted to document that. I wanted to really document that as a practitioner in the science of meteorology that experienced that, so future generations maybe could learn something, because something didn't work, something didn't happen. I thought the death toll that day should have been 30. 30 people heard the warning, knew what to do, went to a safe place, and yet it was their day. They were destined to die on that day. It was their day. But 222 people should be with us today. And so the bottom line on that is that we learned that what we do is not enough. We do physical science. That's my background. We don't know anything about social science, human behavior, getting people to take action. So we've gone and worked with a social scientist for 8 years to help us. But that's when the book idea really hit me, was the fact that maybe I should coalesce all of this writing into a book that could be published, and a publisher came to me and I said, now it's going to take a time. It's going to take a while here,
Right.
because I'm working 16 hours a day. I'm sleeping 3 hours a night. Understand, it's going to take some time. So it was about an 8-year process, but we finally got it done.
I think one of the most fascinating parts of your story is how you became a meteorologist.
You know, nobody, and I mean nobody, told me that weather was a viable career option when I was in high school. Remember the guidance counselors?
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
you go to your guidance counselor and you take a little test or something. And
The Cooter Preference Test.
I remember that the guidance counselor told me that my best options would be forestry or being a funeral home director. And I thought about it. You know, well, you're always going to have timber, and folks are always going to die. But I did enjoy electronics and ham radio. I got my ham radio license when I was 14. I loved tearing equipment apart, putting it back together. So I chose as my major electrical engineering.
Okay.
Again, no human told me that weather was a viable option, although I loved it. Because of the ham radio hobby, I had been involved in constant disasters involving weather. My heart just had a desire to learn more about it. But I just thought I'd do it as an amateur. I'd just be a volunteer. I had been working at a small radio station, to bring in money. My mom finished her degree. We moved to Tuscaloosa when I started 5th grade. She needed 1 year of college, and somehow she made that happen. We lived in a small apartment about the size of a bathroom. She got a job teaching English, so instead of making $400 a year, she was probably making $15,000 a year. And that was a lot of money for us.
Sure.
But we still needed some external money, so I still kept working. And I worked my way through high school at a radio station, and I kept that job through college. And one day, Rabbi, in the summer of 1978, the local TV station called in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Channel 33, WCFT, which is part of the operation I work for today. And they said, would you be interested in working for us? We've heard you doing some weather during all of these tornadoes in the 70s, and you sound like you're interested and you have a good voice. And so I was intrigued by that. I've never thought about television. I certainly never thought about doing weather on television. I had no formal training, but I took that job like that. So this was the summer of 1978, and that's when it started. Haven't looked back. I would later move from Tuscaloosa to Montgomery, Alabama within 3 months, and then to Birmingham when I was 23 the next year in 1979 is the lead weather anchor at Channel 13, the NBC channel. Mm-hmm. And again, I was an engineering major, which was interesting, but I was 23 and had the main weeknight job. I could live my life 1 million times over. That would never happen again. And about that time, Mississippi State University started to offer meteorology. And they had a distance learning option. And this was before the internet, which enabled me to change majors, change schools while I'm working. A lot of driving to Starkville, Mississippi, but we made that happen. So it was some kind of God thing. I feel like Forrest Gump sometimes. You know, I think the most amazing thing about me is that I have never applied for a job. I have never filled out a job application in my life. I've never had a resume. I feel like one day I'm going to wake up and I have to get a real job because every day I have loved everything I've done. I can't wait to go to work. To this day, as old as I am, I cannot wait to go to work today and tell a story about weather.
It shows in what you do. It shows in your heart for it. It really is a gift from God. You know, the advent of the Weather Channel was something that people said, a Weather Channel, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we all do watch the weather. It's an important part of decision making, especially Alabama. I have marveled, and while you are speaking in front of a map, and you're looking at a monitor, there's a large screen behind you with a display like what we have here. There's a monitor there that's got what's going on behind us. And you're looking at a small monitor. You know the cities, you know the counties, you know the intersections. In many cases, in the most remote parts of the state, You know the store that's on the corner of where people are gathering. People are in Downey's department store right now. They're in the basement hiding out as this is passing down Main Street, and you're watching it. And there's no prompt. There's no prompter fast enough to be able to feed you in an earpiece or in any of the technology that we have in television to get you that information that quickly. You not only know your subject and love your subject, but you love the people you serve, and you know the people you serve. You and this man who is on the other side of all this production, in a van, chasing storms years ago to film them, to go after them, not to run away from them, but to run towards them. There's something in your heart, and it's a heart for people. You say it's a heart for weather, but the weather as it relates to people, the impact it has on their lives, I believe that's the combination that brings about that passion.
You have to have a servant's heart to do what we do, to do it properly. I just spoke at Mississippi State. I go back and speak a lot, and we had a big summer program where a lot of meteorology students were gathered together, and I always teach them that unless you have a servant's heart, you can't do this. When I get summer interns, these are brilliant college students majoring in meteorology. This is high-level math. You're doing differential equations. This is hard. When we get them in the summer, the first place I take them is a Walmart in Adamsville, Alabama, which represents the best combination of the people we serve. High income, low income, city, country, black, white, different cultures, they're all in there. And I watch these brilliant college students, and I try to get them engaged with people in the Walmart. Some of them can't do it. They are so different. For these college students, the people in that Walmart don't look like them. They don't think like they think. They don't vote like they vote. They don't live where they live. And the college students can't communicate with them. And sometimes they're just offended by them. And I tell them, if you can't communicate with these people in that Walmart, you have no hope of being successful in doing what we do. You're going to serve everybody, and everybody, it's the people in this Walmart. So that's an important thing for me. It's having a servant's heart. We are in a servant position. And if you take that approach, you'll be successful in life. And the other thing that people need to understand for these college kids, wherever you work, you need to understand the people and their culture. And so you need to be out and weave within that fabric of the culture every day. For me, it's speaking in schools or speaking to a church or speaking to a Rotary Club. When you see people face to face every day and do this for 40 years, you really understand them and they become your family. That's why April 27, 2011 was so hard. Those people that died, they're my family. I had to go through the phases of grief. I didn't speak about that day for 6 months. I had nothing to say. I needed the time to grieve. All of those phases, I had to experience that before I could even talk about that. So becoming part of the culture is important for me. And while you're doing that, when you're speaking in schools every day, guess what you learn? You learn locations, you learn geography. Right. So if there's a tornado 14 miles southwest of Clanton, Alabama, you don't go on television and say, there's a tornado 14 miles southwest of Clanton. You say, there's a tornado right at Jim's Pit Barbecue in Billingsley. Everybody knows where Jim's Pit Barbecue is located. So that also helps. The whole thing, it's just a win, 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 win if you do it right. The biggest struggle is time management. That's a struggle. I think everybody watching this show struggles with it, if they're honest. Mm-hmm. You're busy, I'm busy, we're all busy. But where we are now, in order to do what I do, you just don't sleep much. Most people don't get weather on a normal day on television, they get it on their phone. Right. And those suckers never turn off. So we have to be there. And now with social media, in the world of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, people are asking questions, they want responses. So that's my big struggle is time. And that, to me, that's the greatest equalizer in life. Everybody's got 24 hours, and how you spend it determines who you are.
Well, you're exactly right. We're talking with James Spann, Chief Meteorologist at ABC 3340 here in Birmingham, Alabama, and author of the new book, Weathering Life, which is the backstory and the story about James Spann, his life growing up in South Alabama, how he came into this career, and some of the major weather events of his life. When we return from break, we're going to talk a little bit about the God factor. Is how do we make sense of a God who allows these natural disasters to take place? How do we explain, and how does James explain to these children every Sunday when they are familiar with what he does and who he is and the way he teaches? We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with James Spann, Chief Meteorologist here in Birmingham, Alabama at ABC 3340, and author of the new book, Weathering Life by James Spann, that takes you on a journey of him growing up in South Alabama and his career in weather, spanning more than 40 years, and how it became more than a job. It became a part of who he is, what he does, and how he visits every home in Alabama during many, many major weather events. James Spann, welcome back to the program.
My pleasure.
You have a very unique personal relationship with God. Your faith is something that you don't shy away from. You're known to be very active in your church. You're known to be a man that goes from what people would say would be celebrity status to the every man's Bible study teacher, just another fellow believer that is without guile, not puffed up and proud, but really honoring of God and God's Word. And we look at the sovereignty of God, and we know that in the natural, God reveals supernatural truths. There's all kinds of lessons to be harvested from weather events. We look at the difference between an oak tree and a palm tree, and we think about, who am I in my life when trouble comes? Am I an oak tree and I break when the hard winds come, or am I a palm tree where I find a way to sway back and forth and be flexible and not break under the wind? And we look at things like that, and we find lessons like that, and we try to relate those to children and to people so they can understand how God works. But you have been on top of, personally, in the weather van, chasing the storms and being out there with the cameraman that happens to be sitting on the other side of the cameras here in this studio, and you two share these experiences together. When you, someone who believes in the Word of God, believes in the Bible, believes in the resurrected Messiah, believes in the promises of God, and you see these things happen, how do you reconcile and explain how a loving God can allow these kind of disasters to happen in this world we live in?
Let me give you one event that happened in 1994. March 27th of 1994 was Palm Sunday. We had a tornado day that day, and a violent tornado. This was an EF4. This was not a 0 or a 1. This was a large violent tornado. Hit the Goshen United Methodist Church, which is north of Anniston, Alabama, and east of Gadsden, Alabama, during the morning worship service, as they were doing an Easter drama. 10 children and 10 adults died. They were crushed to death in that building. They didn't hear the warning. The warning was issued at 11:27. The building was destroyed at 11:39. The pastor saw her 4-year-old child die in front of her in church on a Sunday morning. That was a horrific situation. So the building was constructed with donations from all over the world, and guess who they invited to speak on their first Sunday back in that new building? Me. Why me? I don't know. I am a children's minister. That's not what I do, but I was very honored that they did that. That was very touching for me, and I said I'll be glad to do that. So that was probably the hardest message I've had to deliver, because you can understand how people there wanted the same answers that you're just asking me about. How in the world could a God that is love allow this to happen to these precious people, including 10 children, including Hannah Clem, the 4-year-old daughter of the pastor of the church? And I'll be honest with you, the first thing I said, if you're looking for a theological reason why this happened, I'm not your man. I'm here today to love and encourage you. I wanted to say some things, but I didn't. I didn't think it was appropriate. But if you look at the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, it's full of weather disasters, full of them. Hailstorms, massive hailstorms, obviously floods, and windstorms and all of the things we experience have always happened here in the written word. It just happens. And I look back on the life of Christ. He endured some horrible things. The man was beaten and tortured and murdered. And his disciples, look how many of them died. So there's no promise that life's going to be this bowl of cherries where we have every day is good and the weather's always sunny and the humidity is low and nights are crisp. Storms are going to come, and that's just the way it is. Why they happen on a certain day at a certain time, I don't know. I don't have the mind of God.
The title of your book is Weathering Life. So apropos, because that's exactly what we do. Practically, logically, reasonably, we have to weather the storms of life. We have to learn to navigate in the storm. You don't learn to navigate when the water is clear and the vision's clear. You're not looking at your instruments. You can see in front of you. Okay? The real pilots are not the virtual flying VFR. They're the IFR. They're the ones that are flying in the blind. They are completely spatially disoriented. They don't know which way is up, which way is down. They have to rely fully on their instruments and trust those instruments implicitly. Okay? Flying blind, they have to trust. Our relationship with God is, of course, the same way. We have to trust that His ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and whatever His purpose is, and this idea of global warming, this idea of an ecological plan where we have sovereignty over the earth, is in some ways, and I'll ask you, as a weather professional, is that foolishness? Do we contribute? Does that say God is not sovereign? If we look at our stewardship, which is really what a lot of this is about, we have been bad stewards. We have polluted our oceans. We have dumped. There's a ministry in Israel that we support strongly called the Beautiful Land Initiative. It's an entire ministry that cleans up beaches. That's all they do. That's all they do. They get young people together. Right? They get people that are interested and who love the land. They go out and they clean up beaches. That's their ministry, is cleaning up the beaches. Because here the population goes out there, enjoys the wonderful time, and leaves their trash there. Okay? Thinking nothing of it, we become very cavalier in the way we treat this Garden of Eden that now is the globe. It's not just confined to one small space. But when it comes to the concept of global warming, when you hear these programs, these proposals for the Green New Deal or things like this, how realistic is it?
Well, unfortunately, the subject has become politicized.
Yes.
Which means that those on the far right have this position, those on the far left have this position. Most of them have no experience in climatology or meteorology. They just believe what they're going to believe based on their political worldview. And I encourage people to try and break out of that and look at all the actual data. First off, the climate is changing. The climate has always changed. It is changing now, and it will change as long as this planet's here. That's the chaos theory, the way it's set up, that God set it up that way. The climate is changing. The debate is, what is man's role, if any, in climate change? And it's gotten to the point where some believe that every flood, every tornado, every heat wave, every snowstorm, every sunny day is the result of climate change, and weather doesn't exist anymore. And I really have to caution people on that. Weather does exist. What you experience right now, go look out your window, that's weather. Climate is over centuries, over decades. Weather is over hours and minutes and days and weeks. And I'm afraid people have forgotten the difference, and we can't even talk about that. So first off, there's a clear differentiation here between weather and climate. On the anthropogenic question, what is man's role in this? The argument is that the increased levels of CO2 play a role in climate change. And I think to some degree it has to. The question is how much. Is it that much? Is it insignificant? Or is it the bulk of it? And what a lot of people totally deny is natural variability. Of course we have natural variability. But my position is that CO2 is a trace gas, and it's the lifeblood of the planet. It's not a pollutant. It's plant food. But too much of a good thing can be bad. You can kill yourself by drinking too much water.
Right.
And so I do think we have to be careful. And I'm not a big oil guy. I will be the first to buy an electric vehicle when it can get me to the school visit and get me back on a single battery charge. I think we have to be good stewards of the planet. I really do. But this notion that the earth is going to end in 12 years, which is a common theme some of the politicians are promoting, and what's disturbing to me about that, and that's not going to happen, by the way, that's totally bogus. You've got children that are being brought into this system where they're horrified. They're scared to death that there won't be a planet when they're 25 or 30 or 40 years old because of man-made climate change. And that's just not true. It's not. So, and there's more questions than answers, but my position, sure, let's limit CO2. I have no problem with that, but the problem is when you take away affordable energy for some people groups in parts of the world, they will suffer. They will suffer immensely during the winter season. They can freeze to death during the hot season. They can't afford these alternative energy sources. We all have to work in the science community to come up with the right answers and not do this, just let's kill all the coal plants, let's kill all the cars, let's get the airplanes out of the air. We've got to come up with a solution, but there's plenty of time to do that, plenty of time.
You know, the sovereignty of God. God can patch any hole. God can create. He is the creator, we're the creation. In trying to explain God, if we could define God, he wouldn't be God. It's just that simple.
That's true. And I'm seeing people running for office on the idea that they can change the weather. I mean, how, goodness gracious. But I do have a biblical worldview. And accordingly, we should be good stewards of the planet. We should take care of the planet. But yet at the same time, I'm not going to worry about the planet ending in 12 years. If God wants it to, it will.
But we have the Word of God that has not had a word added to it in 2,000 years. Has not changed in 2,000 years. No, not a single word, no additions. Okay, it's the only thing in all of humanity that has remained constant, unchangeable, immovable, incorruptible, and of the 2,500 or so predictions, prophecies, 80% of them have already been fulfilled exactly as they were told. So from a reliability standpoint, the remaining 500 should statistically, probability, be fulfilled as the same way as the prior 80% were fulfilled exactly as God said. So that's my faith coming out of an Old Testament Jewish world, says that this is the God that told me these things were going to happen, and this was the person it was going to happen to, and he told it to me a long, long time ago. He told it to me 4,500 years ago that something was going to happen 2,000 years ago, and it happened exactly the way he said, on the day, at the hour, at the exact moment that he said it was going to happen. And when he said we were going to be enslaved for 400 years, it wasn't 400 years in 1 minute. It was 400 years. I believe as that hand, when he said at midnight, when that second hand swept and hit the straight ups, okay, that's when you slaughter that lamb. That's when you can start consuming that lamb. In Exodus chapter 12, at that hour, I believe that that was the minute, the moment, and the second that 400 years of slavery ended at the exact time God said. And I'm a clear meaning Hebrew reading understanding from that perspective. And the science confirms. You've seen the science confirm so much of the Bible, which allows you to be a scientist and a biblicist at the same time. And there's a very divided world out there that says that science and the Bible are in conflict, but you don't see that conflict. You see the confirmation.
I think that science and the Bible are perfectly compatible. And the one thing I ask for is wisdom. I believe that if you ask for wisdom, you will be given that. I think that is biblical. In my prayer life, I try and pray for others now in my older age more than me, but when I do focus on me, the one thing I typically ask for is for wisdom, because what I do is hard. We are trying to solve a fluid, dynamic motion problem 7 days in advance, which is almost impossible. Where we stand now, it's a miracle how times have changed, even in my 40 years of doing this. But when it comes to the Bible and science, I have absolutely no conflict whatsoever. I've never had a struggle with that. I've been a Christian since I was 12 years old. I accepted Christ in 1968. And as I got into science coming out of engineering, physical science, which is what I do now, not one night, not one day, not one moment have I ever even considered that there was a conflict there. So I'm very comfortable in my position as a Christian and as a scientist. And trust me, I am not alone. I will say this, you have a lot of Christians that are scientists that are afraid to speak because of the stigma that comes with it. You almost are blackballed, and you won't be invited to speak in conferences, and the peer review process won't accept your papers, because if you're a Christian, you can't be a scientist. That's insane. That's nothing more than insanity. A lot of scientists in various disciplines are afraid almost to say out loud, and they do, but they don't maybe speak as volumes about their faith because of the fear that they have of being blackballed.
You know, our program is called Revealing the Truth, where we cover headlines, heartlines, and biblical truth. And in the 1,500 episodes of this program that we've done, I would have to say that you are probably the first who has covered the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth all in the same setting. There's a lot of times we talk about politics with conservative pundits on the program. We talk about people who survivors of breast cancer losing a child, the heartlines. I do hardline, straight up biblical teaching on this program, but you really represent the heart of this program, Revealing the Truth, of God touches us in the headlines. He touches us in the heartlines and with the real truth. Your book's available at
online right now. It's Spann, 2 N's, book, no space.com, spannbook.com. We're in the process of doing some book signings around the state now. It will be in Books A Million, which is a large national chain, later this year, and it goes to Amazon next year.
Okay.
So you can have an opportunity, and I'm in the process of recording it. Many people listen to books now. I'm one of them. I travel to schools every day, and that's a marvelous way of reading. It's to listen. So I'm recording the book, and the audio version should be out on audible.com this fall.
Wonderful. Well, the Bible says faith comes by hearing. I stopped reading. Now, I still read my Bible, but I don't do my Bible reading. I do my Bible listening. 70 hours to hear the entire Bible. 70. You can listen to the Bible driving everywhere, YouVersion, wherever you want on your device, and it's the easiest way to me, and it goes right in. It comes, there's no filter. It is straight in, right to the heart, and it's an important part. In looking at the book, the message, the heart of the message, Weathering Life.
I want people to be encouraged. My favorite New Testament person is Barnabas, an encourager. And we live in a world now where we have just hate, anger, rage. It's everywhere. I can post a picture of a sunset. People are going to be fighting within 5 minutes. But I want people to be encouraged. I see a lot of hurting people, a lot. One of the things, I don't have the gift of discernment. But I can discern one thing. I can walk into any elementary school or my children's worship. I can look a child in the eyes. I can tell you if they're hurting. They are everywhere, and which means families are hurting where that child lives. And I know there are people that are struggling. They're struggling with relational issues. They're struggling with finances. They're struggling with their health or something else, addiction. And I'm hoping that, number one, people are encouraged. I was crushed when my father left. I was crushed like a bug on a windshield. I didn't think I'd live long. I was a sad little boy, very sad for a long time. And I'm hoping people can see that God took a broken situation and used it for something that was really good. And I've had a rewarding life, a rich life. I've been blessed. My family, as an adult, I've been married for 38 years. We've raised 2 boys. I've had an amazing career that I've enjoyed. I want people to know that there's something better. There's a light at the end of this tunnel that you're going through right now. And even during my time in weather, I've had bad days. We all had bad days. But I mainly want it to be an encouragement to people. And one of the things I told those folks at the church where the 20 people had died, I don't have a reason for why this happened for you, but I will say this: God was with you every second that morning, every microsecond that morning, as the building was collapsing, as you were seeing these things happening. You don't feel it. I tell you, you don't feel it. I know you don't, but your feelings have nothing to do with the truth.
Right.
God was with you in that place at that time, and you'll find out at another place at another time with Him why this did happen. Now's not the time. But that's the thing. God will never leave you. He will never abandon you, even if you don't feel like it. And if you have faith, you'll be able to walk the same walk that I've walked. And it's been an up and down journey, but an incredible journey. And I'm so blessed every single day of my life. I can't describe how blessed I am. So I want people to be encouraged. And also for weather people that like weather. There's a lot of weather people in the world that aren't doing it professionally, but they just love weather. They were born with this fascination. It's a walk through some historic events. I've worked through some history in 41 years, and you'll see it from the inside. This is inside baseball, what it was like in that office when this was happening. And I want the weather people to experience that too, because there's going to be a new generation of meteorologists, a whole lot better than my generation. And by reading this book, I think that will help spur them on to be great in their career.
Well, it certainly plants a seed of hope and encouragement. It is detailed, but not over the head of the average reader. They can relate because we've seen it, we've experienced it. No matter what part of the country you're in, you have weather patterns. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, you have weather patterns. I'm in Israel every year, and when the Hamassim winds start coming up out of Egypt, bringing the sand, and the air gets all gritty, and everything changes. It's a pattern, and so it's not predictable, but you know it's going to happen. So it's foreseeable. It's just not predictable. Well, what does that mean? Well, I know it's going to happen. It's foreseeable, but I can't tell you what day. Okay, so it's foreseeable as we come into this hurricane season, we come into this tornado season. It's foreseeable, but can you tell me that it's predictable when certain things fall into place and certain check marks go on those boxes is how you evaluate and say, okay, foreseeable is now becoming predictable, and we get into the probabilities. And so the first part of the message is James Spann is not God, and you can't change the weather, and don't shoot the messenger because you're providing a good and valuable service. But the other part of this book is James Spann the man. And I am thankful to hear your story because you are so relatable, and I don't think people really understand why. And I think this is going to give them a deep understanding of why you are who you are, what's at the core of it, and that the abandonment you felt, that you found that Father in heaven, and that you put your scared hand in His scarred hand, and you've never let go since that time.
Yeah, I sometimes say I'm a fatherless child, but that's not really true. Right. My Father is in heaven, and that's one thing I will say. Occasionally I'll hear people that start to take the Lord's name in vain, and I'll say, just stop it. You're talking about my Father. And so I'm not a fatherless child. I have an eternal Father, and that's the greatest blessing. An earthly father, no. He abandoned me at the age of 7. And I will say, I do write about some reconciliation. I saw him one time before he died, and I got to say the things I needed to say. I got to say that he has no problem with me. I've forgiven you. I don't think he understood me because he had alcohol dementia from years and years of chronic alcohol abuse. It was like talking to a wall. But I was blessed. And let me tell you what, I'm a changed man from that experience. The prayer that changed my life was open my eyes and open my ears to the needs of the people around me. I'd kind of gotten into selfishness as a young adult, but some friends knew that I was struggling. And they said, pray this prayer. And the next morning, my dad was on my mind. He was on my heart, burning. And I've not thought about this man in 30 years. I was in my late 30s, and he was still alive. And I tracked him down, and I found that guy. And I told him that you don't have any problem with me. I've forgiven you. I want you to hear that. And I believed I was there to share the gospel with him. I shared my faith with him that day. Even though I thought I was talking to a wall, he probably couldn't understand a word. I was called to do that. And I said, only perfect people go to heaven, sir. It leaves us out. I'm sorry. But God knew from the beginning that this would be a problem. He didn't go oops or uh-oh. He sent his son Christ to live this perfect life and die. And if you were the only soul on this planet, he'd go up there for you. That's how much he loves you. And all you have to do is accept it like a child accepts a gift at a birthday party. If you confess with Christ as Lord, believe in your heart he's raised from the dead, you'll be saved. He didn't accept my message because he couldn't. He could not. He was drunk. But that was very freeing for me. And I came back with memories of the things that he did with me before he left.
Right.
And I've got those with me, and I'm a changed person after that. And God took that horrible situation, called me to meet him again when I was 30-something years old, 37, and he changed my life. Over and over, these things have happened in my life. So I do have a father, and I'm blessed to have one.
Amen. Amen. We've been talking with James Spann, meteorologist extraordinaire, man of God, and author of the new book, Weathering Life. You can go to jamesspannbook.com.
That's it.
And that's SPANN, jamesspannbook.com. James Spann, it's been an honor and a blessing
My
to have
pleasure.
you here. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
God bless
Thank
you,
you.
my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.